2 weeks, Buckeye fans. Hang on there. 2 weeks and a day for the Buckeyes on October 24th. So hang in there, Big Ten football fans. The day is arriving. We talk Ohio State football here each and every week at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. We invite you in to, of course, like the videos, share them on social media, and please subscribe. And what a panel we have. They have held down the fort for me for several weeks now. From the top, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports, Kevin Noon from Rivals Buckeye Grove. Last but not least, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, of course. And these guys just do the best coverage of Ohio State football. That's why I went after them. And for 74 weeks now, they have obliged. So we're going to hang on to them as long as we possibly can. Boys, how you doing?
Great.
Doing well.
All right. Ohio State hits the field, and all these expectations of how great this team is going to be. I actually had somebody send me a comment yesterday that it's the best quarterback, best wide receivers, best defensive line, best linebackers. That was a bit of a stretch possibly. And the best secondary in the country, and just merely great running backs is what this particular viewer had to say. So he guaranteed a national championship.
Ryan Day's messaging you?
I find it strange that if this person, with all due respect, thinks Ohio State has the best secondary and then only great running backs, there's some question there, because I think the running back situation is probably better than the secondary situation, even with Sean Wade back.
So we invite everyone to leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics, if you would like us to go full throttle at each other. When I say debate topics, I don't know exactly what I mean, but throw them out there, whatever they are. So we are going to focus on running backs and defensive line, because these gentlemen speak with players and coaches on a regular basis. And this was the subject in terms of positional units this week. Steve, we'll start with you, and you can kick it off with whether it be the defensive line or running backs, whatever really hits you as a hot spot in regards to your curiosity of what this team is going to be starting week one.
Yeah, I missed the defensive line call, so I'll leave that for the other experts. I had my wife's grandmother was celebrating, I think it was her 97th birthday, perhaps, and so we had a lunch for her on Wednesday, and Ohio State was not scheduled to do anything on Wednesday, but then they moved the defensive line group from Thursday to Wednesday, and so I missed it. The running backs, I did participate in that on Tuesday, and there was a lot of great stuff that came out of those calls and those meetings with Tony Alford, as well as Trey Sermon, Master Teague. Master Teague talked at great length about the long road that he had coming back from an Achilles injury, suffered roughly 7 months ago at the beginning of preseason practice. He is injured on the first day of spring practice. They're not even in pads or doing full contact that day, and he suffered an Achilles injury. And then you had the pandemic hit the next week, and he had to go through a lot of the rehab on his own, living by himself, and at times doing the exercises by himself, but got through it. And sounds like, according to him, he would have been ready to play if the season had begun on September the 5th or September the 3rd. He would have been able to play in one way or the other. Tony Alford was not quite as ebullient about that idea. Said that I'm not sure that he'd be ready to go 50 or 60 plays if we played a game today, but that's a test that he would have to kind of pass as they go along. And obviously, I'm sure they have not put him in a lot of heavy contact situations. So it could be a case where they get into the first game or two and see how he's able to handle the pushing and the pulling and the hitting and all that. But I took it all as a good sign that he's close to 100%, if not 100%. And Trey Sermon is also 100%. The Oklahoma transfer coming over had a knee injury late last season at Oklahoma, missed the end of their season last year. And this really didn't come up on the call, but man, you talk about Rat getting off the ship at the right time. Oklahoma is 1-2 and has no hope of competing for anything this year. it doesn't appear. And with a terrible defense and a freshman quarterback, they're going to be lucky to finish 7-4 or whatever it may end up. So, he's at least in a position to play for a championship his final year and help his draft stock. So I think those are probably the two big things that came out of it. Marcus Crowley, not quite ready to play, coming back, I think, from a knee injury from last year. Steele Chambers, a walk-on Xavier Johnson, also in the mix there at running back, true freshman Mayan Williams as well. But that was a lot of what I took out of the running back call. Again, with Teague, I want to see him be able to do it against the best teams. He kind of fell off at the end of last year. Penn State, I don't think he even had a carry in the Michigan game, and only 7 carries for 9 yards when he had to fill in for J.K. Dobbins in the Fiesta Bowl against Clemson. So I think that the jury is out on him. Can he do it against the better teams they're going to play?
Before we kick it to you, Tony, I think it's interesting that Steve brings up what Trey Sermon left behind. I was talking Oklahoma football as they prepare for Texas yesterday. The Sooners, prolific in the passing game, of course, but the running game has been just as good and supported that passing game. They're averaging 3.6 yards per carry this year against inferior foes without Trey Sermon, and that's not a way to support a freshman quarterback for as talented as he has been. Master Teague, the interesting thing about him, when I watched him run last year, I thought I was watching Raymond Harris. And then we looked at it in the offseason, and as Steve pointed out a number of times in terms of straight line speed, it's supposed to be explosive. And that's what I'm really going to be looking out for, of whether my eyes were just deceiving me or does Master Teague have that extra gear?
Well, Tony Alford has said he's the fastest running back. He said that last year with Dobbins on the team. And Kevin knows when Teague was looking for offers, he would get the hand time 4.3s at Alabama and Ohio State both at their camps. So there is speed. I think it's the process of getting to that second level and getting past the defensive line. What I've found interesting, and just you talked about what he worked on in the offseason, Teague, is his agility. And he said the injury was a blessing because it allowed him to sort of rebuild – I don't know, his tendons, this is just the way he ran and the way he worked. And he said he's worked on his agility. He's improved his agility, because I think we all saw there was a pretty big difference late in the season between JK and Teague in terms of avoiding tackles and what they did with the ball. And so this is a guy who is more agile and still incredibly strong. He's let's say like 5'11", 225, and really, really mature. I said on my podcast, when I grow up, I hope to be as mature as he is, because he said the toughest thing about all of this wasn't the injury. The being in limbo with the Big Ten was tougher than having to go through all of this rehab by himself for a while before he was allowed to utilize some OSU facilities. And just a really mature kid. And you're talking about Oklahoma and Trey Sermon. If Oklahoma would have used him more last year, he'd probably still be there. And this is a guy that didn't get a touch against Texas in the Red River Shootout last year. The touches were declining before there was any injury, and it was pretty much he had no spot there. They had no use for him, and now it's looking like maybe a bad decision on Oklahoma's part. As 2 months ago, it was looking like a bad decision on Sermon's part, and who knows? Maybe it'll work out for everybody. Does not appear that it has worked out for Oklahoma at this point.
Well, they thought they were going to have Kennedy Brooks, and then he opts out, and then the loss of Kennedy Brooks throws that position into disarray. And, yeah, exactly on to Tony's point, just rewind a couple weeks ago, and you look at, the Big 12 is set to play. I mean, they're playing right from the get-go, and the Big 10 is in mothballs at that point. It's like, well, Trey Sermon gambled and lost there, but I think at the end of the day, he's going to have the last laugh in terms of being able to compete for a championship, because I'm not going to completely be able to handicap that Texas-Oklahoma game other than to say both those teams are handicapped. They're not, neither of them are very good, and it's just I think Trey Sermon's going to be able to have a pretty strong season with the Buckeyes as a 1-2 punch with Master Teague. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is just the amount that Xavier Johnson keeps getting talked about. And, you know, we do sometimes have things dangled at us, like, you know, the diamond formation and this, that, and the other. You know, is this the year that it's like, oh, well, you know, Xavier Johnson's going to be the guy. Oh, is DeMario McCall going to be the guy or whatever? But, you know, we're hearing his name, and it's not a case of us bringing it up. And it's not just a matter of Tony Alford saying it. You have Ryan Day saying it. You have fellow running backs saying it. So I think especially as Marcus Crowley is still a little bit on the mend at this point, and you got to figure somebody like Mayan Williams is still trying to figure out which way is up and which way is down, just, you know, as any kid who came in over the summer is doing at this point. You know, you could see him and Steel Chambers, you know, battling for those third team carries.
And keep in mind about Xavier Johnson, he was a 3-star wide receiver out of high school with offers from like Iowa State and Bowling Green and places like that, but chose to walk on at Ohio State and has played defensive back, has played receiver, running back, all sorts of different things, and was a starter on the special teams. So he's very involved in a lot of what they do. And I asked Tony Alford, who is the leader in the room of the running backs, he basically said it's Teague and Johnson who do most of the answering, and Sermon is coming on strong. But that room, as Kevin is saying, like a lot of guys have injury history. So there's when people are talking about like Xavier Johnson, it might be just a good idea to keep him in the back of your mind when you got Sermon with injury history, Crowley injury history, Teague injury history, and now maybe he may be the 5th running back, but he could end up being like the 3rd or a 2nd at some point this season if things go haywire.
To your point, Steve, with Master Teague, let's see down the stretch. 2 carries, 7 yards. That's not much of a compilation there against Penn State, but 12 for 29 against Michigan at 2.5 per pop. Clemson, of course, 7 carries, 9 yards when J.K. left. And the vaunted Miami of Ohio defense as well held Master Teague to 11 carries and 34 yards. But yeah, the big boys down the stretch did a number on Teague in limited number of carries, 21 in those final 3 contests.
Yeah, I think again, we want to see more out of him. And, you know, you hope that he's able to come back and he's 100% after the injury. But the other thing is, I mean, this is a run game that really complemented what Justin Fields did throwing the football. They had almost perfect balance. I mean, it wasn't entirely equal yardage-wise or whatever, but I just feel like that there was almost perfect balance for this team last year, and we still don't know how much Justin Fields is going to run the ball as well. He shouldn't have to with these talented running backs in there. Crowley to me is kind of a wild card if he can get healthy, and it doesn't sound like he'll be ready till the second half of this abbreviated season probably. And certainly Chambers has got some upside as well. So we'll see, exactly what they do with this. But, this means so much for Sermon. I mean, he's trying to position himself for an NFL career of some sort and trying to get past the injury bug on his own. And everybody said he's been a quality guy since he's arrived in June with the rest of the upperclassmen in mid-June. And seems like he's a guy that they're going to be counting on early and often to spell Master Teague. I don't know if they'll do this by series or if they'll substitute guys mid-series for a particular play set that they want to run, or how it'll go. If one has certain characteristics, you'd think Teague's more of the power back, but and Sermon could be more of a pass catcher, I don't know, or a third down guy perhaps. But I guess I'm interested to see how it all shakes out this fall.
You know, when Justin Fields was compromised in the last 3 to 4 games of the season, it almost, especially, I have glimpses of that Clemson game in which there were stretches of time when they almost didn't look like the same offense. It looked, and I'm not just talking about the productivity without a healthy Fields and without JK, but in regards to the approach, they almost look like a drop back passing team in the second half of that game, where the effect on the running backs is not just the offensive line and obviously their ability, but when Justin Fields is a threat And when they're at that mesh point and the defense has to make that split-second decision coming off of Justin Fields' decision to whether keep the ball or give it to the back, that's sometimes when you see a lot of those big plays pop on the backside of that, because the defense has to there's that moment of uncertainty in trying to find the football.
And that's what they're looking to get back this year with, different styles of running backs. And I think they still need that threat from Fields, though, because we've seen what happens when you don't have that with Dwayne Haskins. And granted, this is a different offensive line, but I think you'll see enough of Fields, who is now a vegan and faster. So he's going to want to show off those wheels, and keep it here and there. And who knows, you may only need to do it in the first game like you did last year. And then you open up with like the 52-yard run for a touchdown, just to, keep people honest and let them know that I will keep it, even though he's not looking forward to getting hit. But when you can do what he can do, use it all, correctly, I guess.
Before we get to the defensive front, I actually had a moment pause there where I was going to bring up my quarter-mile time around the track. I was working on that the last couple of years, but it's not very impressive. So we'll go to David Greenshield's question before we can. That will allow us to go down the number of comments and questions down the live chat before we move on to the defensive line. We brought up the secondary, and David Greenshield says last year's secondary is right there with 1998 and 2016 is the best secondary I have seen at Ohio State. Kevin, what do you think?
I would like to have seen Damon Arnett have both hands for both arms. I think that it was it was a really good secondary, but 98 was pretty fantastic too. Maybe the fact that I look back there, and I was working for one of the local TV stations at the time, and had the opportunity. I was a lot closer to the age of those guys as well. But I think you're going to look back at the Jeff Okudas and Sean Wade and Damon Arnett and Jordan Fuller. God, what Jordan Fuller's been able to do with the LA Rams at this point. He's really proven a lot of doubters wrong. And I know that there's an article about him out there in The Athletic I haven't had a chance to read yet today, but the 19 secondary is really good, but you go back and you look at that 98 one, and maybe looking at 19 and saying that is a little bit of a recency bias, but I have a hard time getting away from that 98 one.
I'm just looking at the 98 because you had Damon Moore, Nate Clements was a young guy. Any secondary with Antoine Winfield in it, I like a lot. There's a lot of good guys there, but that 2016 secondary did stuff that has never been done at Ohio State. Maybe that's just because of Malik Hooker, but they had the rotating of the three corners who are all first rounders eventually, I believe. And Damon Webb is the weak link, and he was perfectly fine as that strong safety, but I don't have fault with last year's either. There's the only issue was maybe the system kind of broke down at the end of the year when they were losing guys, and that's more of a product of the depth than anything else. I can't. You got what, three first round corners in last year's defense as well when you throw Sean Wade in there, and Jordan Fuller was the perfect guy for that role. I would have liked to have seen what Malik Hooker could have done in that system. I think he would have made more plays. I guess I can't go wrong with any of those three. It's a pretty good comparison. I don't know that I have a pecking order. I think maybe the 98 defense gets better the further away we are from it, because you look at that front and it's like, it's not great, the defensive tackles anyway. And I don't know if the linebackers were super great. It was still the best team in the country. We all know that. But yeah, I might put 98 third, and Antoine Winfield is like my all-time favorite Buckeye ever, which I don't like this topic.
Yeah, they've had some great secondaries through the years. When they won the national championship, you had Von Bell out there at safety. He was an All-American. I don't know if he was exactly a first-team All-American or not, but he was up there. what was it? Eli Apple was one corner. The other one is escaping my memory.
Dorian Grant.
Tyvis Powell was a safety. Kind of hit or miss in the NFL with those guys, but the guys that followed them, pretty much all in the NFL. So yeah, they've had some great secondaries really over the last, go back to about 94, 95, 25 years of great secondaries. Before that, it was not a position of great strength, either the corners or the safeties for Ohio State, probably going back to the William White days in the mid 80s. It was not a big position for them those 10 years there in the interim with Cooper and the final years of Earl Bruce. They were playing guys that would be walk-ons on the team today, in my opinion. So, including one who's not so successful as the Nebraska head coach or the LSU defensive coordinator right now, but I digress. How about the All-American defensive end from the mid-90s who can't follow the Corona COVID protocols down in Nashville right now? I had several people who know his abrasive way texted me and said, "What a surprise!" So, yeah.
When John Cooper stepped on campus, evaluated the team, and made a disparaging comment about the lack of talent and his surprise, number 46 was one of the first people that came to mind in regards to watching him try to chase down pretty fleet receivers at places like Michigan. William White came to mind, and I went back a few years before that, because anytime I get a comment like this, I'm doing my best to scan the years and trip them up with some other team. But David did very well there, and he calls us on a regular basis, and he's buttoned up on Ohio State and the nation, so he knows his stuff. Todd Bell and Sean Gale were together in the same secondary that were on Earl Bruce's first team that, of course, took them to the Rose Bowl and on the brink of a national championship.
Do you know, it's strange, we didn't have social media back then in the late 80s. Early 90s, but I was a student on about those times, and in our private chat, one of the players was just referred to by his nickname Toast, and everybody knew the nickname, but we didn't have social media to spread it back then. So how that happened, I don't know. I think everybody watched him play and just said, "Oh, that's Toast." So,
if the shoe fits,
if the horseshoe fits, wear it.
All right. Defensive front has obviously been a strength, both in regards to the talent, but also the depth, and Ohio State kind of being on the forefront with Urban Meyer of the rotation and the need to get 7, 8, 9 players involved to keep these guys fresh because of just the wear and tear on these guys late in games. And Clemson has followed suit, and others. Defensive front, Kevin, your thoughts about where we stand, because some people are concerned about where the Buckeyes are in the middle there.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I was more prepared to talk about the ends at this point, because the inside is
whatever you want.
There are some concerns there. I mean, you don't have Haskell Garrett ready to go at this point. Obviously, went through a scary situation. You lose guys like Devon Hamilton and B.B. Landers and Jayshon Cornell. I mean, you're going to have to see some guys potentially sliding inside. You might have to see a young guy like Ty Hamilton, the younger brother of Devon Hamilton. I mean, he's somebody who's going to have to learn all of the positions as much as he can. I mean, he can't be a 1 or a 0, but, I mean, you're going to have to see some guys step up at this point. But I think you look at Tommy Togiai, who everybody loves to talk about him being the strongest guy on the team, and he doesn't want to focus on that. But, I mean, which, again, just proves to me I'm going to start calling him the Mountain. He's going to be there. Antoine Jackson, you got to be concerned about the status of Teron Vincent at this point, dealing with some rumored nagging injuries. I think the inside of the line, three months ago when I was talking about this team, other than the concern of us just not having a season, I was more curious about how the secondary was going to look. Curious being code for, that's where the concern was. Now I think it's just going to be that interior defensive line and where that depth is going to be, because while they can roll 5-6 guys at the end position and keep everybody fresh, I mean, how many plays is Tommy Togiai and Antoine Jackson are they going to be out there at this point, especially if Haskell Garrett isn't ready until second half of the season, if Teron Vincent is slowed up in any way, shape, or form. And, I mean, they have a couple of young pups who just, may not be ready yet.
I'm just bothered by spitting out the number 46 because as soon as I said that, I knew that was Jim Peel. And then I thought, what was Pelini's number? And then boom,
48.
48, 46.
When your starting safeties are wearing 46 and 48, that's all you need to know. I don't care if it's 1988 or not. If those are your two numbers, those are punishment numbers. We saw that with Damon Arnett when he was being punished in camp. He switched from 3 to 46. And
A to B.
Exactly, 4 to 6. And nobody wants those numbers, but they looked perfect and expected on Jim Peel and Mark Pelini. And you saw the results. Yes, exactly. With the nice red ponies, though. But getting back to the defensive line, Larry Johnson said, "Well, we got 3 guys at each spot on the interior," and then so he's running through them. He's like, "Well, at the nose, we've got this guy, we've got Jerron Cage, we've got this guy, and then over at the 3 tech, we've got this guy, we've got Jerron Cage, we've got this guy." And it's like, whoa, you just mentioned one guy twice. So do you really have? Instead of 6 guys, maybe you have 5 guys, and I don't think he's as deep. And that's without Haskell Garrett and without Teron Vincent. And while they say they expect Haskell Garrett back sooner than a lot of people, I don't know. What does that mean? Penn State, is he going to, he's not cleared for practice yet, so I don't know how quickly he'll be out there. And Teron Vincent isn't cleared yet either. And when he does get cleared, you still need a couple of weeks, I guess, probably getting him ready. So at this point, I'm not expecting either of them for Penn State. I may be completely wrong, but what they will be able to do is slide a couple of defensive ends in on the Rushman package, Tyler Friday being one of them. Larry Johnson wouldn't tell us who he was going to be sliding inside, but Tyler Friday was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it. I can't wait. It's going to be fun. Wait till you guys see what's going to go on." And he was spilling the beans. I don't know who the other guy is. Zach Harrison has done it. Tyreek Smith has done it. I wouldn't expect Jonathan Cooper or Javonte Jean-Baptiste to do it because that's not really their frame. But I think they can get away with the thinness on the defensive line or defensive tackles simply because of how much people throw the ball now and how much things are spread out. I think you're still going to be asking a lot of like Tyler Friday and Tyreek Smith to move inside at times. But, as those 2 guys have been compared to Tyquan Lewis quite a bit since the day they arrived. And Tyquan Lewis was that kind of guy who could go inside or outside and was grit. And they both latch onto that. And it's concerning. It'll be more concerning in the fourth quarter and in December than maybe October. But you just got to be careful that they don't wear down. And maybe by that point, Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent can come in and be fresher and be some sort of reinforcement. But I think the defensive tackle is definitely a concern past your first 2 guys.
I would agree. I think, you think about last year, Ja'Shawn Cornell and Devon Hamilton, what they meant. They set the point of attack on the defense, either the run game or the pass rush. They collapsed pockets. They made first hits on ball carriers. They did so much that really went unnoticed. And, Hamilton propelled himself into the NFL as a result of it. I'm not sure what's going on with Cornell. He might be on a practice team or something somewhere. But, obviously both of those guys had career years. And right now, other than Togiai, they don't have anybody who's really ever proven they can do it. I would probably lean toward the veteran Antoine Jackson as a guy who, the moving sidewalk is ending. Please look down. You got to do it now or never. And I would think that maybe he's a guy that will come through in this absence. I also got the impression neither Garrett or Vincent would be ready anytime soon. And it's too bad. Obviously, the Garrett situation, everybody knows, he was shot off-campus incident. And the repercussions of that have just been, terrible for him, obviously, health-wise, but, it's bleeding over into his football as well. You're thankful he's still alive. I mean, given what transpired there. But I think the outside guys are going to be okay. I think Cooper, while not a high-end defensive end, is still a guy that can make an impact, maybe on a 30, 40 play a game basis. I don't think you can leave him out there for 65 plays and expect him to dominate a football game. But I think in a selected 25 or 30 plays, he can really do some things. I wrote a story today for our site about the interview with Tyreek Smith, and he readily admits, that his first 2 years have been a wash because of injuries and different problems. And, he had 3 sacks last year. 2 of them were against Maryland in a game that they won by 59 points. So it really, he was not a prime time when they need a stop type guy last year. So he's moving into that role. Zach Harrison, we think, is already at that level or moving toward that level. So those 2 guys, Cooper. Friday, he's a guy who's played some, but, I just don't recall hearing his name mentioned a whole lot. And kind of the same for Javonte Jean-Baptiste. It's kind of the same thing, guys. This is your 3rd or 4th year. It's time. It's time to start producing. And by that, we mean putting pressure on quarterbacks, getting to the quarterback, getting home, as they say, deflecting throws, sniffing things out, and, just making plays. And we just haven't seen those guys really do that to this point. I haven't heard a whole lot about Noah Potter. Not sure what's going on with him. They said they had 5 defensive ends that they were counting on. Now, he's only a redshirt freshman, so it's still early for him. But I would have thought maybe he would have been a little higher up on that list as well, but apparently hasn't cracked that top 5 rotation yet. And young kid, I did hear good things from Larry Johnson about Darian Henry Young out of Cincinnati. It sounds like he's a guy, as he said, could play a backup role and probably get some, if games get out of hand, they'll not hesitate to put him in there and get him some seasoning. So I think that's a good thing there. So overall, ends, I'd call it a B+, and tackles, I'd have to call it a C or a B- right now, just because you just don't know who's going to make plays out of that group as we sit here today.
Well, it's a good thing they go into their week 3 and week 4. They play the Delaney branch of the Big Ten with Rutgers and Maryland, so there'll be a good opportunity for them to
the Duaney division
get a lot of reps for a lot of guys at that point. But you got to get through the first 2 weeks, obviously. But we did hear a little bit about Noah Potter. He is a young guy still. He's still trying to figure it all out. Didn't come in with the type of hype of a Zach Harrison or whatever, but pretty much everybody I've spoken to has said, that he's somebody who's picking it up. It's just a matter of, if you understand it conceptually, but being able to get everything going at that point is it takes a little bit of time, but I expect him to be contributing by the time that we get to the end of the year. A name that I'm curious to see on another young guy is to see what Jaden McKenzie's going to be able to do, because I think that he was a guy that was a little bit underrated coming out of high school. I think he's got a lot of physical gifts. It's just going to be a matter of him earning that type of playing time. And then I think once he gets out there, it'll all click.
Yeah, and Jaden McKenzie, they need him right now at defensive tackle. And I'm still confused as to who's at nose and who's at 3 tech, and maybe they're not quite sure yet. We didn't hear anything really about Carmonte Hamilton, the tight end, redshirt freshman tight end who has moved to defensive tackle. So he's probably way down the list. It was interesting talking about Ty Hamilton, and they said they've put 20 pounds on him. He's up to 285. And Larry Johnson said they're trying to move him from being a big nose tackle to a 3 tech. And I don't know what big nose tackle is at 285, but I'm not going to argue with Larry Johnson. He's the best in the business. And so Ty Hamilton, the freshman, will probably be in there. He might be one of those 3 guys at each position. But Antoine Jackson, probably the 3 tech next to Tommy Togia. I think they're okay there, at least against the run. And then when it comes to pass rushing, then, you're substituting some of those 5 defensive ends that Larry Johnson said they're all starters. And in fact, all 5 did start a game, at least one game last year. Jean-Baptiste started, I think, the Rutgers game. Zach Harrison started Clemson and maybe one other game. And, of course, Jonathan Cooper was in there as well. And Tyreek Smith and Tyler Friday both started here and there in between injuries and various things. The expectations for Tyreek Smith are interesting. I think Tyler Friday said if it hadn't been – well, actually, he said, like, if Tyreek Smith had not come to Ohio State, basically everybody would know who he is by now. And I don't know that that's a damning thing about Ohio State. Just he's been playing behind some people and also dealt with injuries. But, like, if he was somewhere else, everybody would know him, saying, hey, watch out for this guy this year. And I think while we're all talking about Zach Harrison and expecting Chase Young from Zach Harrison, maybe don't forget about Tyreek Smith, because remember, Tyquan Lewis was once the Big Ten Defensive Lineman of the Year in his playing days. So there are more than just the Boses and the Chase Youngs in terms of comparisons and things like that. So when we talk to these guys, we're like, how do you play 5 guys? Don't you hate having to come out of the game? And they're all like, no, because you play 25 snaps, you put your best stuff on film, and then when you watch it, you can see, and you don't want to see your bad self on film. And so they can just continue to churn these guys out just like they did in 2017 with, Nick Bosa and Sam Hubbard and Jalen Holmes and Tyquan Lewis, where offensive tackles have I wouldn't say no chance. They just have no days off, basically, no snaps off, where they can't substitute. The offense can't substitute at left tackle and right tackle, and yet these guys just come in and they're all fresh. So it is always interesting to me the way Larry Johnson and Urban Meyer and now Ryan Day gets everybody to buy in to this rotation, and it could be at any position. Heck, it's at Sam with Justin Hilliard and Baron Browning, where you've got 2 guys who are seniors and both trying to show the NFL what they can do, and they're like best friends. Yay, we get to share. And it's interesting to watch this whole dynamic of everybody, I guess, being friendly about competing and sharing roles.
I'm all yours all the time here, folks. Here 24/7 talking college football. We talk Ohio State at least once a week with these guys: Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, and of course Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove. Blocko, thank you so much for the super chat sticker, whatever that is. It's a sticker, it's a super chat, whatever it is. Thank you so much for that. Asking about a true 6 to 7 man wide receiver rotation and not hearing anything recently about Jameson Williams. Tony,
just wait. Yeah, he'll be in the starting lineup. Looks like he'll be at the X, which puts Chris Olave still at the Z and Garrett Wilson at the H in the slot. And it's a new position for Jameson Williams, but he's looking forward to he's talked about he likes the physicality of it. And I think once he gets the ball, that's kind of the big thing with him, is maybe there was some lapses in focus last year when the ball was in the air or getting to the ball. And we saw what he can do once he gets the football. And now you're putting him in a position where he's going to be playing half the game, at least while the game is still in doubt. And yeah, if there's not enough talk about him, maybe that's our fault, or it's just a process of camp, not having enough days in the week to get everything written and or podcasts up or videos to produce. But yeah, the expectations are very high for Jameson. Where and I talked about this in my podcast this week. Like the typical X at Ohio State may get, like, if they were to get 6 catches in a game, you're looking at like 72, 75 yards. You give Jameson Williams 6 catches in a game, and probably one of them is going for 40 yards, if not 80, or so 6 catches with him is going to be much different than 6 catches with Benjamin Victor or Austin Mack. And so I think people should be very excited about him. And then behind him, I think it'll be freshman G. Scott Jr., who is, already looking physically like a freshman David Boston, which is we don't need to go further into that comparison, but just a physical dude, as we saw in the circle drill video that Ohio State posted on Twitter this week.
So Kevin, David Greenshield is asking about the third receivers. So Tony, you're basically saying it's Jameson Williams behind Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave.
Yeah.
I agree. We have heard a lot about Jameson Williams as much as we can in terms of getting out there last Saturday and seeing stretching and things along those lines. But according to everybody that we've heard from and just talking to people, Jameson Williams really seems to be that third guy. I could see somebody being more of a possession type of receiver behind Wilson and Olave, and maybe having more receptions. But I agree with Tony in terms of you get the ball in Jameson Williams' space and you just give him a little bit of space. He doesn't need a lot, and he's going to break a lot of big plays. So he could be that type of guy who, let's just base it off of a 9-game regular season. Maybe put the over-under at like 40 to 42 catches or whatever. I like maybe a little bit above that. But, I mean, he's going to have a ridiculous amount of yards per completion, in my opinion. But in terms of just, if you're looking at receptions or whatnot, I don't know. I think one of the freshmen is really going to just come through. And I like G. Scott maybe to be that guy. And that's not to take anything away from Jackson Smith-Njigba or Julian Fleming or whatnot. But everything I've heard about G. Scott Jr. has just been amazing at this point. And, we'll see what happens against real competition or whatnot. And I think it's, again, a situation once we get through the first couple games of the season, Ohio State kind of gets into a little bit of calmer waters at that point, and that's going to be an opportunity for some big numbers to be put up.
If we're talking like the third leading receiver, I think you could also put Jackson Smith-Njigba in there because he's going to be in the slot, and that's where a lot of the catches go for Ohio State's for Ohio State. We go back to 2018 where Paris Campbell had 90 catches and KJ Hill had like 70 or 72, and they shared reps in the slot. So there are going to be opportunities, and Jackson Smith-Njigba for me is he could be the best freshman receiver at Ohio State in a long time, and that's with what Garrett Wilson did last year with 30 catches and what David Boston did in 1996 with like 33 catches, and those are the two best. And I don't know that he's going to be able to get there because of the shortage, but in this pass-happy offense that we have now at Ohio State, he could be a guy who maybe he does catch 28, 32 balls and is the third leading pass catcher. But I still think it's going to be Jameson Williams in there as that number 3 guy. Chris Olave probably 45 catches, something like that. And I think Garrett Wilson will lead the Buckeyes in receptions just because that position always does. The only time it hasn't since the Urban Meyer era started, the only time the slot hasn't led the team in reception was with Michael Thomas in 2014 and 2015. So you can kind of understand that one.
We talk Ohio State football every week with these 3 gentlemen. You've got Kevin New next to me from Buckeye Grove on Arrivals. You got Tony Gerdeman down there in the corner opposite me from Buckeye Scoop, and Steve Hellwagon, 247 Sports Bucknuts. So much appreciate Steve posting these videos on their site, talking Ohio State football. I hope you viewers understand what we've got here each and every week with these 3. Looking for comments and questions. Don't necessarily know that the opting in and out of players is that relevant at this point, but it was asked if you guys think that the constant I've lost track of the question, just based on the players opting in and out, if that had anything to do with, obviously it did, with the virus in and of itself. Anything else on here? A lot of 2003 talk. Game played in 2003. We're weeding through that again. All right. There it is. There it is.
You look at Miami's current roster, and most of them were still in diapers or prior to that, when Miami was relevant. I know that they have a big game coming up against Clemson this weekend. I am a big Derek King fan. I think they're an exciting team to watch, but Clemson knows how to win these types of games. Miami hasn't won one of these games in forever and a day. And I think when Miami gets punched in the mouth the first time, and it's going to happen repeatedly, especially if it's a wet track, I think that Clemson is going to run away with this game. Not even going to be close, 24, 28 points minimum.
The comment below, confidence has been a lacking trait in Miami for years. This season is different. I would argue the opposite. Confidence has been way too high for years at Miami for no reason at all. And that has been a poor
You,
trait.
baby. It's the you.
And when you are confident for no reason, and it's like building a house on sand, basically. And that's what Miami has been for many, many years. Maybe they have a foundation now. Who knows? We'll see. I do find it ironic, Kevin, that bad weather would sidetrack the Hurricanes.
Yeah.
I was going to say that I think they have the right head coach. I think that they're a program on the rise, but they're not ready yet. They're not ready yet. Beating up on Florida State, who's going to get boat raced by Notre Dame and whoever else they played at this point. Louisville, who was a fraudulent top 25 team just because other conferences weren't in the picture. I don't see this. I think Miami will give them a good quarter, but Clemson will, the class will rise to the top, and Clemson has been far and away the best ACC team for at least a decade at this point, and this game does not. I have a feeling I'll be going over and looking for other games at the same time because this game won't hold my attention.
I think Eric King he's somewhat legitimate, I think, at quarterback for Miami. I mean, they've put some points on the board. It's whether or not they can contain Clemson is probably the biggest question. Clemson gave up 23 points last week to Virginia, so I don't think their defense is quite where it was a year ago. I think some of those NFL losses are finally starting to come home to roost for them, just as they probably will for Ohio State, and somewhat even Alabama hasn't looked perfect so far this year, but they've been pretty good. So, yeah, maybe, this is a year where Florida, for instance, I've been very impressed with what I've seen out of Florida so far with Trask at quarterback, that maybe they sneak in there instead of somebody. But I guess let's play this game on Saturday night and see if Clemson, this year's edition of Clemson, is for real, or if Miami is close to being back. A lot of people skeptical about that, but I do like King, and we'll see. Maybe it gets to be a shootout, and a funny bounce goes one way or the other, and Miami somehow is there at the end. But they're a 14-point underdog, and that kind of caught my eye because, first of all, Clemson hasn't been that dominant. Secondly, Miami, except for who they played, Louisville and Florida State, they have been that dominant. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to see when they shake it up and see what comes out.
Miami went 10-0 in 2017, but really had no big wins. I think that there was a Notre Dame win in there or something, but we haven't really experienced a Miami fan base during the social media era where they could secure a win like this. I don't know if America is ready. I don't know if the internet is ready. I certainly know I am not ready for what this could mean if Miami were to win and what the fan reaction would be like. Fortunately, I don't think it's a realistic concern. So I won't get too worked up about it this weekend. And if it happens, there's always a couple weeks down the road when they lose to Pittsburgh.
I know my Phil Steele.
They don't need to have a good team for this because they keep trying to overturn the 2002 Fiesta Bowl. That game was forever and a day ago. They keep doing it. It was defensive. It was pass interference. Held them in the end zone. Get over it. Get over it.
My Phil Steele has the results of that 2017
down there. But get over it. You lost.
My Phil Steele has the results of that 2017 season. They lost to Pittsburgh, who I don't think was very good. They were 11.5-point favorite and lost the game 24-14. And then the last time they played Clemson was in the ACC championship game that year, and they lost 38-3 as like a 10-1 or 11-1 team. They lost 38-3 to Clemson. So, are we in for something like that tomorrow? And I think King keeps them in the game, but nothing would surprise me, I guess.
That team had a 14-3 lead in the Orange Bowl against Wisconsin and lost by 10.
Yeah. Wisconsin seems to play them every year in the postseason and beats them. So,
Three
yeah.
times in the last roughly 10 years.
Yeah.
That's not a good matchup for Miami, which is, I would say, maybe a superficial kind of program at times. And
Toughness,
Wisconsin's too fast.
superficiality.
And Wisconsin is very not
Toughness.
superficial.
Too much Wisconsin speed.
Superficiality.
Yes.
Blocking and tackling, posing for the cameras. Blocking and
Whoa.
tackling.
Here we go.
Wearing a turnover chain.
I'm going to have to bear the brunt of all this. You guys realize that, right?
We've missed you.
So I pointed out this was about 6 months ago after the last season in which I actually thought I overrated Miami, and it turned out that I did at 8-4, and they went 6-7. The previous year 9-3 when they went 7-6. I had to point that out a number of times a few nights ago as I was called a Miami hater for simply pointing to the video in which I outlined that over the last 15 years, it's been a 57% winning percentage program. So they have recruited top 15 to 20 talent, not elite talent across the board, but top 15 to 20 talent. And they've turned that top 15 talent into top 40 teams. And that's what they've been. And there have been, I think I mentioned this a couple months ago right here, 43 teams that have finished in the AP top 10 since Miami last did. 43, that's 8 teams plus per Power 5 conference. It's pretty staggering. And as Tony pointed out, this is going to be a huge game for Miami. This is run of the mill for Clemson, and that's all there is to it. There's nothing wrong with Miami fans and wanting to think that this is the team, and it may very well be a better team than most think, and may knock off Clemson because they have finally gotten a quarterback with dynamic playmaking ability who seems to be making the right decisions, and he's such a huge upgrade over what they've had the last 10 or 15 years. But they've played UAB, Louisville, and Florida State, and they've done against those teams what you would expect a top 10 team to do, but now they're truly playing a top 3 to 4 team in the country.
You go from coaches like Jimmy Johnson, Dennis Erickson, and Butch Davis to Larry Coker, Randy Shannon, Manny Moe, and Jack, and some homeless bum off of the corner of A1A and
JBL.
I mean,
JBL was the coach there for a while, and so was Mark Richt for about a cup of coffee.
I think they're always going to be able to have talent, but it's so much about development, and they've just made ridiculously bad head coaching hires, and I think they really thought that they stole one when they brought in Mark Richt, and Mark Richt was a shell of the Mark Richt that we saw at UGA. And I think that Manny Diaz is the right guy. We'll see how long he lasts. But they went from having some of the biggest names in coaching to, guys that I don't really even remember the name of. I mean, when the name that jumps off the page the most to me is Al Golden, it may be Al Bundy.
Yeah, that's the guy I was referring to as JBL, the wrestler. They think they were separated at birth.
I would like to ask people that reference that game to not only watch the play that resulted in, of course, a converted first down on the pass interference. Just go back and watch the last 5 minutes of the game. Just try to remove whatever colors from your fandom, whichever side. Just watch the last 5 minutes of the game, or watch the entire game again. But watch the last 5 minutes and see if you see any other calls that could have reversed fortunes for an offense staying on the field and maybe running out the clock.
Remove your colors, remove your fake turnover chains, and just watch the game and see Dustin Fox getting his jersey ripped off, and see Chris Gamble catching a pass on 3rd and 14 that gets ruled an incompletion. And then, we could also talk about Clemson, bad calls in the Clemson game if we want to start complaining about bad refs or refs in particular. But yeah, that Miami game, I wonder why Miami fans can't just watch it and understand it and see it, because there's plenty of video proof. There's why they can't get over it, I guess, because maybe they can't get over it because it is true what I always say, and that's Jim Tressel broke Miami. And if they could just reverse time and make it like that never happened, then maybe they won't be broken. But you can't get that game back. You can't get the last 2 decades back. You can't fix it all in one day. And maybe that's another reason why the U is the issue, has the issues it does, is because they think they're the U, so it can just be, there's nothing to fix. You just go and play. And whenever somebody transfers to Miami, that's the last I'm ever going to see them, because I know pretty much their career is over. Now, maybe that's not, we're seeing some Jalen Phillips is doing well at Miami, but when people, what's that?
When he's not ejected from games.
Well, but like when somebody chooses Miami, it's just like, okay, I see you. You're not interested in football. You're interested in the idea of Miami. And I think when you're not interested in football, it's really hard to build a football culture. And I don't think they have a football culture. I think they have a Hurricanes culture, and I don't think that's winning. And I don't think all of that talent back in the early 90s and mid 90s, they were playing against offenses and defenses that were all very basic. There's no more basic anymore. And I would like to see what what they could have done against what we consider modern things now, and would they still hold up, and would things be so much? Would it be as easy to stop for all of those guys? Sure, Ed Reed would still be great. There'd still be plenty of talent, but would they have just been not necessarily a dynasty? Lesser than maybe Alabama? Would they be lesser than a Clemson? I don't think they would have been the end all be all. I don't think they'd be worthy of 2 30 for 30 documentaries. Not that they were worthy of that anyway.
It wouldn't translate well into today's game, because with targeting, and if you breathe on the quarterback or something, I mean, that's not good. I don't think that it was a different era. I don't think that those teams back then would translate well.
There's a need for discipline now that maybe there wasn't back then. And you don't want to give offenses too many opportunities for, a late hit or roughing the punter and stuff like that, because that will come back to haunt you.
Well, there's a few different reasons why that loss has stung, and it has reverberated and continued. One being exactly what you said. They haven't bounced back from it. So had they stayed an elite team and continue to win championships and stay in contention, then it would be, well, we should have won that game, but it would have been lost. Plus, the sting of losing a championship is one thing, but the sting of losing a championship when you already assumed it was a win, that's tough to take.
But Ohio State is over the 2006 game against Florida. Everybody thought they were going to win that one, but Miami, you're right. There's a confidence level there that no other people can match. I think what it reminds me of is, like, Miami has become what happened to Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. If the coach had just put him in that championship game, they would have won. And because he didn't get to be put into that game, he now lives in a van out in the field all by himself, and just has driven himself crazy thinking about if the coach just would have put him in, he would have been all state. And if Ohio State wouldn't have beaten Miami, Miami would have been all state, and they could throw a football over them mountains.
Back to my Al Bundy. He once scored 5 touchdowns against Polk High. Well, I'm sure they're going to handle the Heat loss tonight really well too. So
we talk Ohio State football here each and every week.
Sometimes.
Unless
Miami comes out.
I just did an hour before this hour. I'm my head's spinning right now.
Next week we'll talk Michigan and go for an hour.
Oh Lord.
The Miami invasion is here, and the Miami invasion comes to all my shows, which is a great thing. I appreciate the Miami fan base that I have. I just simply tell the truth and do my very best to stay neutral and tell the truth. And the facts, sometimes it is a dynasty of sorts, a legacy unlike anything in college football. I've got a contributor that comes on, Cam Underwood, that calls it the microwave dynasty, and that's exactly what it was. It was an early 80s through mid-90s dynasty, and then a couple years tacked on around 2000, 2001, and 2. And that's the history of the program.
Was the Nebraska dynasty better? Because I remember like in college where there was just no hope of Nebraska losing, like for like 2 or 3 years straight. Like, and then when Arizona State did it, you're like, whoa, this sort of thing is possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which one would be better, although I guess then they played on the field and decided it.
Yeah. When Nebraska finally beat Miami in the 94-95 Orange Bowl, that was a shock to many because Miami just trounced them every time they got on the field. And then Nebraska figured out that they could keep their style of offense, but just add some speed and figure that out. And there's actually a good documentary on the Big Ten Network about that Nebraska team that that pulled through and finally beat Miami, and they changed their philosophy. They were able to, and this is difficult to do, was to add to their previous philosophy, not discard the Nebraska way and the weightlifting and the bulk and the power game, but just add to it. And it was very successful with 3 championships in 4 years. Good stuff. Good stuff. Again, you guys let us know where we can find you other than right here. So, Kevin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm on the internet. No, I'm sorry. I just zoned out for a second. I'm over at BuckeyeGrove.com. You can find me on social at Kevin_Noon. And, yeah, check us out. We're 2 weeks and a day away from the start of the season. Start rolling out depth charts and all sorts of good features. And, of course, you can hear me on my own podcast on the Buckeye Grove Instant Access BIA podcast on all of your usual outlets.
Steve
Hellwagon, bucknuts.com, Twitter, All-Star, and just very patient, just sitting here waiting like everybody else. 2 more weeks, and our long national nightmare will be over. And I don't mean the presidential election. I mean the start of Big Ten football.
And you can find me at buckeyescoop.com or on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman. I host a podcast, a Buckeye Weekly podcast, going about 2 or 3 times a week now. So it's poorly titled, but frequently downloadable. So check me out there. Thanks, Mark.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Hurricanes, Chris, Mark, if my Canes win tomorrow, because I've got the most unique top 25 out there, where will they rank? Because it's kind of odd that they ranked number 2 at one point, then they dropped to 5 or 6, and people question that, and I understand why on the surface. But other teams beat better teams to supplant them. So it's ripped apart every week, and then we put it back together. They win that game against Clemson on the road, they might be number 1 in the country. Maybe, I'm not saying the best team in the country. I'm saying ranked number 1 by me.
And they would definitely be ranked number 1 if they win, and also Florida State beats Notre Dame.
That helps in my equation. Yes.
You might not have to factor that part in, though, so just a heads up.
That seems unlikely.
All right, everyone. Appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much. It's always appreciated, and I hope everyone appreciates what we have right here, and I will stop saying the word appreciated. So thank you.
Appreciate it.
Everyone. We'll be back next week.